Did Putin really pull back 10,000 troops from the Ukrainian border? Or was it only to move them somewhere else? Was it really a scale down or just Putin's deceptions ahead of an attack? Russian troops in units at the Southern and Western Military Command, which covers occupied Crimea and the Ukrainian border region, were loaded onto rail and road transports recently and moved away, having reportedly completed their tasks after some training drills. Does that sound like de-escalation or an exercise in military strategy before a large incursion? Nearly all of Putin's other troops remain at various points along the Ukraine border. News out of the Pentagon and State Department tell us that Russian troops are actually being moved closer to the border and into attack positions. So it's hard to read Putin's playbook, isn't it? As of this taping, no invasion has happened, but long-range artillery and rockets are in firing position and troops await at the ready. I'm Terry Gilberg, and this is Timeline with Terry. Today's Timeline topic, reading Russia's intentions. I'll be right back.
CTA is a call to action to all conservatives to save America from left-wing radicals.
Nearly 45% of the U.S. workforce already have plans for job hopping in 2021. Now, many of those 70 million job hoppers are just fed up, and they're ready to work somewhere else. Somewhere where they will be free. Maybe it's time for your talents to go to a city or a company that actually values your freedom. Post your resume on redballoon.org so that you can connect with this ever-growing list of free speech employers who would love to hire you.
Travel is getting back to normal. Now is the perfect time to fly somewhere. You can save up to 75% on more than 500 airlines and 300,000 hotels. Use our free service to find the lowest prices we have. You know you're itching to go somewhere, so make this free call right now. We have all the best airline, hotel, and rental car prices all in one place. The best way to get these rock bottom prices is to call.
Welcome back to Timeline with Terry. On this show, we delve into complex topics of the day with experts and professionals, giving them ample time to explain their positions and their views. The situation with Ukraine and Russia is indeed complex, and reading Putin's mind is far from easy. There's long history with Ukraine and Russia, and after Putin's success in taking Crimea, and with President Biden in the White House, perhaps Putin sees an opportunity now to take Ukraine. But will he? An expert in national security and leadership joins us to discuss this very topic. He's David Hamilton, the founder and CEO of America's Future series. Its speakers feature some of the biggest government and military leaders from past decades, including General Martin Dempsey and Navy Vice Admiral Mike McConnell, who served as Director of National Intelligence. David Hamilton, my guest, is also an economist and a management consultant with an MBA. Hello, David. Nice to have you, sir.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you bet, and I'm delighted. When I booked you for this show, we talked a while back about Ukraine, and there has been no move. There was no move at that time, and as of this taping, there's no invasion at this time either. But during that then and the now, we thought that there would be somewhere during that week. All right. So let me start with how I posed it in my open. 10,000 troops pulled back, so says Russian news services. pulled back, and we saw tanks getting on rails. We saw tanks leaving. We saw soldiers sort of wrapping up their exercises. But before, those soldiers looked quite at the ready to go ahead with being part of an invasion into Ukraine. Do you believe Putin pulled back, truly pulled back, which signaled positivity for the diplomacy that was underway, or do you think he just pulled it as show and then moved those troops into another place along the border?
And actually, I think it's both. I do believe he pulled some back, mostly for optics. But they're not going. They're not going home. They're still on the border. They're still nearby. They're still in the ready. So a lot of what he does, and we always talk about Putin. Is he playing chess or checkers? What are we playing? And when you and I spoke, I said sometimes we're playing hopscotch. And compared to him, I mean, I think it's a lot for optics, and I also think it may be an opportunity to try to spark dialogue. I think sometimes he means what he says. Sometimes he is actually trying to negotiate, and I think in part that was an olive branch in order to maybe spark some diplomatic efforts between the two.
Or it was a head fake.
Yeah.
He's pulling back. It looks like diplomatic efforts. It looks like we'll go back to the table. It looks like my security is not threatened anymore, and so I'm going to recede, pull back. But it also could have been a head fake. Right now, we're learning that there's over 130,000 troops or so at the Ukraine border. Pulled back the 10, like we talked about. Who knows if they're repositioned? I don't know that. I don't think you know that. I don't think maybe even our Pentagon knows that. But with these moves, he also said, David, that neighboring countries and indeed the West hang on my every word. And therefore, I've already won the psychological war without firing a single shot. Now, we know in all warfare, there's also the psychological element, of course. So would you say he's right on that?
Oh, absolutely. He would rather win a battle without having to spill blood or other costs. And if he can use intelligence, misinformation, psychological warfare, he'll do that. He's a trained KGB operative and leader for many, many years. And he'd rather win a battle that he doesn't have to fight. So I think that's true. Ultimately, I think this thing boils down to what you said a moment ago, though. It is, does he feel secure? Does Russia feel secure? America, for a few decades now, has really tried to do a good thing in our eyes, which is push to expand NATO, to expand capitalism, to expand free enterprise and democracy. Well, we think that's wonderful, but that is a security threat to him and to Russia. And we really have to understand that. If you add an enemy on his border and you arm it, just like we did with Germany, that is a threat to him. And that is first and foremost his concern. Would he like to take over the Ukraine? Would he like to expand the eastern part, which is ethnically, linguistically Russian? Sure, that's what he did with the Crimea.
Sure.
If he can get it, and he can get it easy, and it doesn't cost too much, et cetera. Has he done things to set that up? Yes, he's done the same thing in Crimea. In Donbass, et cetera, on the east that he did in Crimea.
In those two cities, in the Donbass.
He covertly has put people in there. He's readying it for it. He's tested cyber attacks and all sorts of things. He's softening up to see how we react and all that. But ultimately, this all gets back to our desire to expand democracy and expand free enterprise. And to his mind, it's putting a threat next to him. Not only a threat militarily, but also economically in terms of the system. He doesn't want people in his country getting ideas about wanting more freedom, et cetera, right? So all of these things are threatening to him. And when you and I spoke, I said, when people aren't sure what Putin thinks, we might ask him. Right? Okay. So, and they are going. Go
to the horse's mouth and just ask him.
Just ask him, right? And so, we don't hear it all, but they are going back and forth. And he made a list of demands. And first on his list of demands was is stopping the expansion of NATO. That was first and foremost. Many of our pundits are calling that a Maximist list, asking for the world and understanding you're not going to get it. And from his point of view, that is not a Maximist list. He genuinely says, I am willing to invade this country if you make it a NATO ally, if you put it under that umbrella. And that means something to him, just like Germany. We put weapons and troops, et cetera, right? American troops. He doesn't want American troops on his border. We wouldn't want the Canadians to become a vassal of the Soviet Union, right? We didn't want Cuba. Okay, so it's all understandable. All of this is sound and fury singing nothing in my mind until we address this issue about will we or will we not concede on expanding the Ukraine and putting them into expanding NATO and putting the Ukraine into the NATO system.
Well, the geography here, and you just alluded to it, is so important. Russia needs border states that buffer her against the West and Western interests. I think that needs to be drilled down into people's brains so they understand that this is core to the problem. And if he feels insecure, he will move. Now, you mentioned earlier the psychological battle. I think in his mind, he thinks he won a psychological battle because everybody's all up in arms and Putin's going to move and, oh my goodness, and lions and tigers and bears. And so he says, see, I won this psychological battle. The West knows that I'm serious, and now I pull back. But what battle is it really? We're still in the same place today at this taping that we were a week ago when I booked you for the show, David.
Yeah, I was a little bit more hopeful that there wouldn't be an invasion when you and I last spoke. I become less and less hopeful, and that's because we are largely intransigent on eastern Ukraine, and he would really like to have Luhansk, Donetsk. He'd like to have that area of Donbass where he is claiming people are being mistreated, or ethnic Russians are being mistreated, which is part of the setup for the provocation for an invasion. So he would like to take that area. Is he willing to extend the cost? Probably not normally. But if these two motivations, a need for security, and then also looking like he could probably take it easily. Because the administration did say early on, this was President Biden said, if it was a small incursion, it wouldn't be that big a deal. That came out of the White House. Now the White House walked that back.
I remember that.
And they've been walking it out really hard lately, right?
Yeah. There's no small incursion. There's nothing small about this. Although, we forgive him because he had a senior moment, our president.
Yeah. So, that withstanding, we did sort of open a crack in the door a little bit more. He was already there. This war's been going on for some time. Over 13,000 Ukrainians have died since this conflict started. They've been fighting a trench warfare battle along the edges for a number of years. And it's actually an old-style trench warfare, just like it was in World War I. They literally have trenches, and they've stopped using cell phones. They have dug hardwired phones so that the Russians can't intercept their messaging. So there's a great documentary on it. Everyone should probably watch it. Go out to YouTube. You can see it for free. But this has been going on for some time. He's been softening them up, and mostly to test what we will do. He knows he can take the Ukraine. It'll be a little bloody. But he wanted to see, do we blink? And at first we blinked, and now we're not. But to be perfectly honest, what I would really love to see, because I can tell you, I don't really care about the Ukraine. Deeply, do I care about the Ukraine? No, I care about America's interests. I care about world peace. And if we went back to the status quo, because we poked the bear, if we went back to the status quo where the Ukraine was Switzerland, if it wasn't under the NATO umbrella, it wasn't part of Russia, we would have a good chance at negotiating something. And it wouldn't be the takeover perhaps of Donbass.
When did we poke the bear, though, David? I mean, in terms of the history of this, there's been fighting in the region for so long for their independence. They pushed back after Crimea. The rest, other than those two cities in Luhansk and Donetsk, the rest of Ukraine pushed back hard. There's been the Minsk Accord, which of course didn't work very well. Minsk II, which we're still in, they're still fighting. So when did the United States get in there and actually poke the bear in terms of your timeline?
So my timeline includes Europe. The Europeans, more so than us, have been saying, let's add the Ukraine to NATO and to the European Union. adding them to the European Union is a threat to Putin. Okay,
All right,
that's
so
the
you're
goal.
talking more about Europe poking the bear than the United States specifically.
Specifically, and it's been
Okay.
a combined effort. And we very much would love to, as a people, in terms of our philosophy, in terms of our values, we would love to spread democracy and freedom, liberty to the Ukrainians.
Of course.
And we're unabashed about that. But this is where the conflict has always gotten down to. No, we can agree that we're right, but in a matter of realpolitik, if we're looking at it that way, if we're being realistic, et cetera, I think it is absolutely a non-negotiable, and he is willing to go to war if you add a enemy state, a well-armed enemy state, et cetera, right against his border.
Well, I think it's non-negotiable at this point. And again, I just want to put a timestamp on this taping. Next week is the end of the Olympics. I think it's the Olympics is the end of February 20th, 21st or something when the closing ceremonies are. And there was a lot of talk, as you well know, David, prior, that he will strike after the Olympics. He's emboldened by the idea that President Xi may take over Taiwan. It certainly is possible that the United States could be seeing conflicts on both sides of the world. And then what do we do? Well, here's what's happened so far. He's put 130, maybe 140,000 troops on the Ukrainian border, then pulls back 10. Now they're scattered who knows where. Nothing has changed other than he's bought time. And I think it's too late for negotiations. I also think that if he's going to do it, and as of today, I think he will strike after the Olympics. Your thought?
Well, my thoughts are he is a master of optics, right? He's using optics. He's using the excuse that, and it could be the reality, that ethnic Russians are being mistreated with the humanitarian violations in the eastern part of the country, of the border.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, he wouldn't want to do it during the Olympics, et cetera. He would want to do it at a quieter moment, perhaps. And also, as you said earlier, that when we're distracted. So the new elements, I mean, this conflict has been going on for a long time. He's had roughly 100,000 people around the border for over a year. He's escalated it, right, and moved them closer. But this conflict and this actual war has been going on for some time. What's new here is, I think we demonstrated some weakness, some willingness, lack of resolve, et cetera. We showed some weakness with regard to Afghanistan. We're dealing with the Chinese, et cetera, right? We gave them Nord Stream 2, et cetera. I think all of these things have combined to embolden him. And then when, and it's been NATO that has continued to push for Ukraine to join NATO, he's finally said, look, nope, not going to do that. You can't do that. And if I'm going to take it, I'm going to be as smart about it as possible. And I'm going to use every asset I can, including our being distracted with another near-peer adversary or enemy. And to some degree, though, we've been pushing Russia into the arms of China. And this is they've decided the two of them will gang up against us. And normally, where you have a really strong enemy, China, that you want to get the weaker one to join your side. Well, we don't want to see Russia and China, having a love affair, which they seem to be having.
They do.
And okay, the other thing that we need to understand is Europe is not that important to us. Americans think Europe is extremely important, but there are three sort of core strategic areas of the world that America should be focused on. And first and foremost, it's East Asia. It's China. It's the South China Sea. It's Taiwan. It's all those things, okay? Secondly, it's the Middle East because of the oil, because of the energy. The third most important, in my opinion, and others, strategic area in the world is Europe. And we're not talking England. We're not talking Britain. I mean, we're not talking France, et cetera. We're talking Central and Eastern Europe. It's really unfortunate in my mind that we're spending so much time, energy, effort, and possibly blood over this. There are a lot of saber rattling and people being wanting to be hawks, both on the left and the right, about this. I hope it's not too late for negotiations. I really do. But it's going to take leadership. It's going to take conviction and say, okay, I'll give you this. We will draw our interest in Ukraine joining NATO. You must move back your troops, et cetera. You have to sign an accord that you won't attack them, which of course he could violate. But I think that's the cornerstone of any kind of negotiated settlement. And I don't know if we are or if we should be willing to see an invasion.
Hold that thought, David, because I'm getting the red light that we have to take a quick break. But when we come back, let's talk about his strategy thus far for an invasion, how he has built this up. And I want you to emphasize after that the importance of Eastern Europe. All right, when we come back. All right. I'm Terry Gilbert. This is Timeline with Terry. I'm on with David Hamilton. We're talking all things Ukraine. I'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. Retailers, shopping channels, and now even banks have tried canceling myself and MyPillow. Well, during these times, your support has meant everything to us. My employees and I want to personally thank each and every one of you by passing the savings directly on to you. For a limited time, you can get my brand new product, My Slippers, for 50% off. That's the lowest price ever. And remember, My Slippers come with an exclusive 4-layer design. These layers combine to give you amazing comfort and support and help reduce stress on your feet. And with the durable indoor-outdoor sole, you can wear My Slippers anytime, anywhere. I personally guarantee these will be the most comfortable slippers you'll ever own. So go to MyPillow.com now and use the promo code on your screen or call the 1-800 number below to get My Slippers for 50% off, the lowest price in history. And if you do it right now, I'm going to include a free gift with your purchase. Thank you and God bless.
Charlize, luxury skincare for real women, because you're worth it.
Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen, where every dish has fresh and delicious farm-to-table ingredients that is sure to uplift your taste buds. Experience our creamy grits topped with grilled shrimp in our homemade shrimp sauce. Try our fried whole chicken wings or our marinated lamb chops cooked to your perfection. Come try Costa Coffee. It's the best coffee you've never tasted. Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen, located at 3205 Cumberland Boulevard, Southeast, Suite 105 in Atlanta. Grits and Eggs Breakfast Kitchen. Enter as strangers, leave as friends. Cheers.
The principles of liberty, freedom, and the tenets of our constitutional republic are under attack. That's why we are building freedomsquare.com. Freedomsquare.com, designed to unite freedom-loving Americans. Freedomsquare.com. Freedom lives here.
Centner Academy is a fully accredited independent private school, family operated since 1968, providing a college prep curriculum for students with learning differences in grades 4 through 12. Centner Academy is now hiring talented elementary, middle, and high school teachers. Call 305-576-6070 for more information.
Have you been fired from your job? Do you now need affordable family health insurance? Want coverage as fast as tomorrow? We have it. Affordable family health insurance with no long-term commitments and flexible payments. Medical bills can add up overnight. Could you afford that right now? Now is the time to get the health insurance benefits you need at an affordable fixed monthly cost. Call now to lock in your low monthly rate.
back on Timeline with Terry. I'm here with David Hamilton. We are talking about the Ukraine. Before the break, I wanted to get into, and now we will, get into what Putin has shown us so far about his strategy. We mentioned 130,000 troops. From the way I look at the map, it looks like a pincher moment, right? He's got a blockade on all of the ports. He's got military exercises also in Belarus, and those haven't stopped. So he's surrounding it as best he can. What else do you see as what he's done thus far?
So I absolutely agree with your assessment. He can come from the north. He's got troops on their northern border. He's certainly got them on the east. And because they took the Crimea, they, like you said, have control of the ports and troops on the ground. They also have missiles that can reach there in 4 or 5 minutes. So if they decide to, if he decides to take over Ukraine, I think he'll do it fairly decisively, fairly quickly. Even though the Ukrainians are well armed and they're resolved. I mean, they're a fierce people, but they're just outmatched, and Russia will take them over, et cetera. He's also prepared using cyber warfare. He's been testing their weaknesses there, and he's also been testing their emotional resolve, the psychological warfare, and to a great deal that's on us, right? Showing us that, right? They took a shot at. The Russians deny it, but they supposedly put a rocket through a kindergarten here recently, right, et cetera. And I think that's testing to see how people react. Okay. All
right. You mentioned cyber warfare, and I think our audience is well aware that that's been going on for a long time. But you didn't mention the vulnerability of the Ukraine grid. And they have rocked the Ukrainians' world a lot with regard to the electrical grid. For his part, President Zelensky has played down a lot of this, and he did it even this past week. He sort of says, well, we are going to have a unifying moment. I think that came Tuesday or Wednesday of this past week. Stay calm, stay strong, stay focused, and almost like the Ukrainian people were supposed to wave the flag, yay, we've beaten the monster off our back. And yet the West, they're hearing, oh my goodness, we better have tougher sanctions. We better talk to Germany real quickly. We better stop the pipeline flow, which I'm not sure how President Biden could do that anyway. So I think it's kind of a schizophrenic thing going on, don't you, with the Ukrainian people? Talk to us about that.
Certainly. I don't think a lot of Americans, it's not our area of expertise or interest. We don't focus on this area much, right? So we have a bit of a fragmented and a misguided understanding of what our capabilities are and what we should do. I think Zelensky has to do what he's doing. He's trying to show a position of strength and confidence, et cetera, and inspire his people. That's to be expected. Ultimately, this gets down to this one thing I keep hammering. Does the Ukraine join NATO or not? Mm-hmm. If we can, he's not going to go away if we don't come to some accord on that. All these other things can be handled. And back to your earlier point, though, about the grid, he's doing that through cyber warfare. He's not knocking them out with grenades. He's not using rockets for that. So that's a form of cyber warfare that they're using, knocking out their power. If he can turn off their water, he can turn off their lights, turn off their heat, turn off their gas, and the Ukraine gets gas from Russia. Okay.
But is he doing all of that through cyber warfare? Is he doing that as well through other means?
Both. It's psychological warfare. It's softening them up economically. It's using cyber to do that. But it's all about preparing and softening up the enemy, and making the victory as easy as possible. Now, the Nord Stream 2 thing is really important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Let me stop you there just for a minute before we get into that, because I truly do not know how President Biden is going to work that. But before we get into that, the first thing President Biden has said is that tough sanctions. What does that mean? We won't know what that means until an invasion happens. And then the second thing he said is that, he will stop. He said, quote, he will stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, Russia's gas lifeline, really, to Germany down through the Baltic Sea. Talk to us first about the sanctions, and then talk to us about this pipeline, how Biden will do both. Because he sure rattled everybody's cage that this is his strategy, this is his plan, he's going to do it, you just wait and see, I'm tough. But no details.
Let's go through the options. What potential economic sanctions could the United States, the West, incur on Russia, right? Could do a trade embargo, no longer do business with them, right? We could no longer take their goods, et cetera. We could bring back our diplomats. We could shut our embassy. But really, it's commerce that would hurt them, and the ability to sell oil and gas, as you mentioned, through the pipelines. And there's two of them, Nord Stream 1 and 2. They just recently got 2. We gave them that, which is emboldened. And I think if we said we're going to take that away from you now, they would view that as an act of war. If they try to do that to one of our pipelines, take over the Panama Canal or anything like that, we would view that as an act of war.
Yeah, we would.
Okay, so how bad do we want this? I mean, we can saber rattle all we want, but is this a battle with a country that is fiercely nationalistic, with a tough sort of autocratic ruler, 19th century ruler, who has nuclear weapons? Is this a battle we want to fight? And it's really interesting. We could do that because we're here at home where we're safe and comfortable, et cetera, right? Where they're looking at life and death in the face right now. I saw an interviewer interview the mayor of Kiev, the former heavyweight champ of the world, Vitaly Klitschko, and he made this sort of a very, sort of American question. He said, so does this feel like the night before a big fight? And Klitschko, to a certain extent, was insulted by that. He said, no, this is not sport. This is life and death. This is families. This is children. Okay? And I think everybody needs to take a deep breath and say, do we have to have this country as part of NATO? Are we willing to go to war with them? Are we willing to have some sort of economic battle, impose all of these sanctions? And then to your point earlier, would he care? I've gone to this, I've sunk this cost in, I now control this country, I have its resources, et cetera. It was worth it to me anyway. I mean, I think that's the calculus he had. He said, look, I've already sunk this, I've taken it over. I know that Americans have short memories. In 4 or 5 years, this will go away, and I'm here for the long haul.
Our response has been from the White House under President Biden that they are a sovereign nation. They need our help. They've wanted to join NATO for a long time. It's in the West's interest to have them with NATO. Biden has sent 5,000 troops to Poland alone 2 weeks ago, and another, I think it was 8,500 troops are just at the ready. I don't know if some of those have been deployed anywhere or not. I haven't been following that. And when he says he's going to stop this pipeline, it sounds like this is very much in our best interest and in the interests of Europe. But here's the question. To your point and to your theme, is this a fight that we want? Is this a fight that we can win? Germany has something to say about this pipeline, David. And it sounds to me, from what I've seen out of their press, that Germany is talking cozy with Putin. So much for our linking arms with Western countries to help Ukraine, a sovereign nation, and they need our help. It doesn't sound so much like maybe Germany would be helpful there, helping as a Western state, which goes to your point.
Germany has the old Texas saying they have this approach which just lets you and him fight. Okay? And America is going to do the heavy lifting, et cetera. I think Germany's going to be okay with it, but they're not going to want to lose life and limb money, except they're not going to want to do that, and that will. Okay? And if you think about it, selfishly from the United States perspective, in a period of really, really high inflation, if oil is coming out of there, that's good for all of us, right? Because we need more right now. Well, this is too high. But yes, we actually need our Keystone pipeline opened up as well. Imagine we had both of those sources of energy coming and the impact that would have on inflation. Back to your earlier question, is this one we can win, et cetera? I would ask the question, is this one we want to start? Do we want to start? If we care about the Ukrainians, they're a sovereign nation, do we want to be the ones that cause them to be taken over? I keep saying that we're causing this. It's the threat of them joining NATO that provokes all of this. and then a series of dominoes fall, okay? And then we bluster and we say Nord Stream 2, and we say economic sanctions, and we say all that kind of stuff. And ultimately, Putin, in my opinion, is going to say, fine, it's on. Let's go for it.
And that's what you mean by poke the bear.
Yes. Trying to add.
Okay.
The path to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Heard that 1,000 times. We're trying to do the right thing by Ukraine. We want them to have freedom, etc. And if we want to do that with a country that has nuclear weapons, God bless. Go ahead.
All right. So when you say we,
I think we did better. If America and the Europeans, if the Americans and the Europeans would go back to the status quo, where Ukraine is independent, where it's not part of NATO, we don't make any incursions on that. We don't threaten the Nord Stream pipeline. We open up our own. That'd be great. If we go back to the original status quo, then the provocation for this, the motivation for goes down. Now, there are some people that want to get inside Putin's mind that says he's an imperialist and he wants to expand Russia. If that is in fact true, then everything I just said doesn't matter. I mean, if he really just wants the Ukraine, then everything I just said doesn't matter. He'll do it anyway, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's because of NATO, we need to find that out. Adding this threat, this NATO threat to him, if that's the cause, I think we owe it to the Ukrainians and to ourselves, meaning Americans and the Europeans, to give that a shot. And we dismissed it out of hand. When that demand, number one on his list, was sent over to our side, we said, oh, no. And Europe said that. We're going to support Ukraine's addition and being added to the European Union and to NATO. That's where it all gets down to.
Well, when you say the we, you're referring to the Biden administration, I think, and not the Trump administration. Am I correct?
I'm referring to the West, America, and its allies in Europe. And then when I say we, sometimes I do mean currently right now we. It is the Biden administration dealing with this, right? My organization and I personally have been very apolitical, right? But as an objective person, when Trump was in, because he was considered a hardliner in Putin's mind, this sort of thing didn't happen. It didn't happen in Syria. Okay, there was no red line, etc. Okay, so I think it takes a combination of strength and determination, but you also have to be a little bit magnanimous and a little generous, and say, okay, yeah, this has been threatening you. You have to have a little bit of understanding of the other guy's position. We're threatening you. We're poking the bear by trying to add them to NATO. If we can't resolve that, this will happen. There will be.
All right. So we can't unring the bell and go back to Trump's time. You're 100% right. Trump kept Putin at bay. He also kept President Xi at bay. He also met Little Rocket Man and went across the demarcation zone. So there was a lot of potential hot spots that weren't so hot when he was in office. But now we have Biden in office, and you're saying the deal breaker is NATO. Is there still time to have some deep dive, not just surface negotiations, but deep dive negotiations with the one thing that he wants, and that is the Ukraine not to be part of NATO? Is there time?
Pick up that red phone. Pick up that red phone and call him directly. Don't go through surrogates. Don't go with people who have different motivations, etc. Your staff or whatever. Don't go through a bunch of the very young people that we have who are what I would refer to as 20th century diplomats. You need to understand that Putin is a 19th century autocrat who does understand power. So
and former KGB agent who loved the Soviet Union. Right.
So be strong, etc., but also say, I'm willing to meet you somewhere. But it takes picking up that red phone and talking directly to him. If we want to avoid this war, I think that's what has to happen.
Is that in Biden? Is that in President Biden's DNA? To pick up the red phone, be strong, show some backbone, and say, let's talk once again about NATO vis-a-vis the Ukraine.
Before we go to war, before we have all kinds of loss, let's you and me figure this out. I don't know if it's in his DNA. I don't know if he's going to do it, et cetera, but I would strongly urge him to pick up the phone, talk directly to him, and say, hey, if your biggest interest is this NATO issue and we resolve that, can we go back to the status quo?
Well, if it's not David in his DNA, it's not going to happen. And I think you said, I'm sorry?
Shows like this need to get that message out. Like people need to hear this from whatever outlet it is. Pick up the phone, negotiate. What do you have to lose? You have nothing to lose. You're going to have a war. So if you want to maybe not have a war, pick up the phone.
Hold on to your next thought there. We're going to take another break. We have you for another segment, and we'll get into more of it. We'll get into the protests. We'll get into the Minsk agreements, both 1 and both 2, and more about, ultimately, if you had Biden's ear, other than just pick up the phone, what other messages would you give Biden vis-a-vis the mindset of Putin over this conflict? I'm Terry Gilbert. This is Timeline with Terry. I'm on with David Hamilton.
CTA is a call to action to all conservatives to save America from left-wing radicals.
Nearly 45% of the U.S. workforce already have plans for job hopping in 2021. Now, many of those 70 million job hoppers are just fed up, and they're ready to work somewhere else. Somewhere where they will be free. Maybe it's time for your talents to go to a city or a company that actually values your freedom. Post your resume on redballoon.org so that you can connect with this ever-growing list of free speech employers who would love to hire you.
The following is a health warning to all liberals. Please do not watch conservative television of America, as prolonged viewing can cause your brain to swell and explode and mess up your couch. CTA values all lives from the first heartbeat in the womb to the last dying breath. Conservative television of America, we say what you're thinking.
We're back on Timeline with Terry. I'm Terry Gilbert. I've got David Hamilton as my guest. He's an expert in national security and leadership. He's also the founder and CEO of America's Future Series, which is a series of speakers, very prominent ones in government and military. He's also an economist and a management consultant, and he has shared with us his view on where the conflict is with Russia and Ukraine. And before the break, you essentially said President Biden has to pick up the phone and say, let's go back to the way it was before. And how do we negotiate this how do we negotiate that at this late stage, President Putin? If we give on the NATO thing, on that idea, we can probably have more peace in the region. Very good. That's where you think it needs to go. But what are the Ukrainian people saying? It's their sovereign nation. It's their government. So here you have Putin and the United States deciding for them.
Oh, I'm sure they're not thrilled with this, that the greater powers are deciding their life or death situations and their freedom. But they really have sort of three potential outcomes. One is they join NATO, the European Union, and everything works out really nice and smoothly and lovely. That's one option. The other option is they're invaded, right, and taken over. And the other option is returning to the status quo that we had, where they weren't part of NATO, et cetera. They do have, leave the ethnic areas the same, et cetera, and Donbass, et cetera. Those are really kind of the three basic outcomes, possibilities, et cetera, right? But I really don't think option one, where they join NATO, join European Union, et cetera, is really an option. in my assessment of Putin, that is literally a non-negotiable, and he is willing to go to war over that.
Mm-hmm. Because it would be a buffer state to him that has now turned to the West.
Absolutely. And when we take territory over like that, Germany, my father was in charge of the Fulda garrison, Fulda, Germany, on the East German border. That was the first place that the Germans would come across. Okay, and we moved as many troops as we could, American troops, into Germany, and we had a big base there. He was the base commander. Okay, that's what Putin sees us doing again in the Ukraine, putting our troops, projecting our power there.
So you said before the break you didn't think that it was in President Biden's DNA to pick up the phone, and then I added, certainly not at this late stage, to renegotiate all over again. But you also said at the top of this conversation that there's always time. If an invasion doesn't happen, there still is time to renegotiate, right? To get it's not over.
I don't know if it's in his DNA or not. I really can't comment on that. I would say I hope it is, and I hope that ego and face isn't what decides whether there's a war or not. It may take maybe have to be a little bit humble and say, let's talk this out. It's not in your best interest for us to fight, not in our best interest, etc. You know, before we decide to go to war, let's try this. Let's figure this out. Okay? And if it doesn't work, you didn't lose anything. You haven't lost anything. If you think that war is inevitable, you might as well try this.
And this is what you would put in Biden's ear if you had his ear. Once again, go back, show some strength, pick up the phone, eat a little humble pie, and let's go back to the status quo.
Yeah, and I don't think it's having to eat a whole lot of humble pie to simply say, we'll stop pushing this issue, right? We'll stop pushing the Ukraine joining NATO. We'll table that for now. Let's leave that alone. Okay.
All right. Well, then the other negotiable things and the other things that are on the table have to do with stopping the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which services, if I got my numbers right, about 42 million Germans. I think that's about right. It's a little over 40 million. And so then that would be talked about again, and everything else would dovetail accordingly.
Yeah, so Putin has to do a little calculus. He has to calculate, if I go to war, if I take over the Ukraine, will the Germans and the Americans have the stomach, and will they come to agreement on cutting off one or both of the pipelines? And I think he thinks they probably won't. We probably won't. So that's my loss, okay?
Because Germany needs it, and we've got a weak president.
Okay. So Germany
yes,
needs it.
yes.
I won't comment on the president, right? But I will say that Germany does need it. The world needs it, and we already gave Nord Stream 2 to him. So if he's looking at that, he's going to go, we just gave him Nord Stream 2, authorized that. We're going to go to war over it, and we're going to take it away? Probably not. So negotiate, go back to the status quo. You can always throw out the possibility, the unlikely possibility that we will cut off Nord Stream 2, Nord Stream 1, and other economic sanctions, diplomatic sanctions. He knows those exist, et cetera, right? But ultimately, is it worth it to him to take over the Ukraine and have a buffer state that he doesn't have to worry about if America and its European allies refuse to stop banging that drum?
David, if this does come to fruition and he takes over Ukraine, on a scale of 1 to 10, how does that embolden Putin to take over and have more expansion some other place in the world?
You know, I don't think it does a great deal.
Really?
I don't think he knows that if he tries to take over Germany or Poland or something like that, that is a trigger for World War III. And he's a pragmatist. I don't think he's suicidal. You know, we're not suicidal. This isn't NATO. This isn't Poland. This isn't Germany. This isn't Italy. This isn't, you know, he's not trying to take over Europe. If he tried to take over Europe, yeah, you know, it would be on. So I don't think that we have to worry about that. And if it comes back 2 decades later under another person, we'll deal with that then about the Ukraine and try to take that over. But if we can, you know, and I understand the peace in our time Chamberlain argument that people are saying, hey, you don't appease him. And I'm not saying that. Let's not appease him. Okay, let's just stop poking the bear. This is not like Germany with Hitler trying to take over the world, right? Now, this is him viewing himself as being attacked.
And I also think there's another element, but I'm going to ask you if you think I'm right on this. I think he sees himself as the leader of a country that had great glory during the Soviet Union. It's Russia now, but he was a Soviet KGB agent. He loved the Soviet Union. He worked for the Soviet Union. He would die for the Soviet Union. He was an agent for the Soviet Union. Do you think that's in his mindset, that if he can get Ukraine, it can kind of be more like the glory days of the past?
And I think he has multiple ways of achieving that goal that aren't connected.
Is that a yes?
Yes, it's a qualified yes. It's how he does it. He can use cyber warfare. He can use drug money. You know, they're some of the biggest pushers in the world. They can use their oil and gas, et cetera, right? So that control. There's a lot of ways for him to try to build back their prominence that doesn't have to do with taking territory.
And it doesn't have to do with boots on the ground war either. There's other ways, other options. To your point, there's other options here, and the cyber option is a big one, and it's been done already. And you know, the Ukrainian people, from what I have studied and what I can kind of assess, they're kind of used to this. They've been doing this for a long time. You know, he rattles and has cyber warfare, and maybe the grid gets a little funky, and they got blackouts and this, that, and the other thing. They're used to this kind of constant black cloud over their head. So there's other ways other than mano a mano fighting in the region. I agree with that.
And this is a tough population. This is a really, you know, you've got to be impressed with and feel for the Ukrainian population as a people. I mean, they've been dealing, as you say, with this for, you know, generations, and then more recently, even more threatening and more dire. And they are resolved. The only problem is they are outmatched.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a David and Goliath issue.
Yeah. Well, we pray for peace in the region. In the time we have left, I'd like you to tell me about your America Future series, why you founded it, what it does, how our audience can find it, how they can hear some of these great speakers, military speakers. What was your MO for starting it?
Certainly. So it's a 12-year-old speaker series focused on U.S. global competitiveness and national security. We started with Ross Perot, T. Boone Pickens, Randall Stevenson of AT&T. All these people wanted a nonpartisan venue forum for discussing these important geopolitical and other issues. So we put on events. Some are now virtual because of COVID, and we had Sir Richard Branson join us for our very first one, which was a great launch. He'll come back here, hopefully on the anniversary of his flight on 7/11. He announced he was going on our program. On 2/22, we have General Keith Alexander, speaking of cybersecurity, former head of the NSA. We're honoring him. There is a virtual event called our National Security Dual Use Technology Summit, and people can find out about that, and I'll give you all a code so all of your listeners can come free as our guests. But it's America's Future Series. AFseries.com is the easiest one to find. Just the letter A, the letter F, and then series.com. And this code is AFS-2/22 for the date 2/22.
All right, let me repeat that back. A like Apple, Frank -2-22, and that's a code.
It's a code, so AFS.
AFS?
Yeah,
I see, I understand. Okay.
Okay, then a dash, and then 2/22 with a slash between it, like the date, okay? That code, when they go to check out, when they check out, they can put that in there, and it takes care of the cost for that event on this 22nd. If they're in Dallas or want to come to Dallas, we honor General Dunford. General Petraeus is hosting on 4/13. All of this can be found on the website AFseries.com. We have our space event, as I mentioned, on 7/11, and we're hopefully going to honor Elon Musk at the end of the year here in Dallas Forward.
Is that right? So you hail from Dallas, and when COVID is finally behind us, people can come to the event and or see it virtually as well?
Correct. So we have a number of virtual events. This one in February is virtual. The one in Dallas with General Dunford, that's in person. It's a rubber chicken dinner, as we like to say, right? Raises money for charity. We've raised a little over $7 million. I'm sorry, almost $7 million for different military causes. My motivation is I'm a direct descendant of in the Hamilton family, and my brother and I are the only two Hamiltons that didn't serve. My father served 3 tours of NAM, and we think that the 93% who didn't serve should do something. And so We try to raise money and awareness for worthy causes. We try to bring people smarter than us to talk about these issues and help America remain free and strong and compete with the rest of the world, along with its allies. And, it's really grown. The volunteers, the people on our board of advisors are outstanding. A lot of secretaries of the Army, Navy, et cetera. And I think it has all to do with the mission. And the mission ultimately is to help make America a stronger, more noble, and more generous country.
And to educate the American people about her.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And don't forget our heroes and the cost of freedom. One of my very good friends, Maggie Magellas, the most heavily decorated 82nd Airborne officer, passed away about a year ago at the age of 103. And we give an award in his name because we don't want people to forget him. And we want people to understand that not only do our military serve in uniform, but they can continue to serve when they come home. And we need to make sure that they come home whole, and that we integrate them into society, and we take care of our veterans. And so we're honoring General Dunford with that award, the Magellas Award. General Petraeus is a past recipient. And we use it as an opportunity to raise money and awareness for worthy cause like Semper Fi, which is General Dunford's charity.
I see. You mentioned when you started to describe this, David, Ross Perot. And so I take it that you not only have speakers that are military brass and top flight, maybe CIA folks and people behind the scenes in intelligence, but also politicians. Is that true?
Politicians, CEOs. We've honored 30 CEOs with our 5-star award. Ross was the first recipient. And then we had an event where he presented that award with Chairman Dempsey to 5 CEOs for extraordinary support of our military. No one in my mind has done more for our military than Ross Perot did. T. Boone, of course, on oil and gas, et cetera. He said, with regard to Keystone at our event early on, he said, that pipeline can go west as easy as it can go south. Mm-hmm. Canadians are patient people, but the Chinese will buy that oil if we don't.
Yeah. Well, it's a very good cause. We're given the red light. We got to wrap it up. Tell us one more time the website, and then give us one more time the code for AFS for that event. And do you just put the date in at the end of that on the code if you want to come free?
Yeah, come free. So the website is www.afseries, so 2 letters, AF and then the word series.com. This code is AFS with a dash. Then it has the date, 2/22.
All right, so no, and that's all regarding this year, right?
That's regarding this particular event coming up. And we'll hand out some other codes, et cetera. But come to the website and see that. We'll make sure that they get taken care of on all our other events as well.
So nice to have you, David. You're a world of knowledge. And I am particularly happy that you impressed upon this audience kind of direct facts, negotiating techniques, rather than just partisan one way or the other. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Enjoyed your show.
Thank you very much, and I hope you come back on Timeline with Terry. That's it for another edition. I'm Terry Gilbert. We'll see you tomorrow on another edition of Timeline with Terry.